Live from the Dancing School lobby in Chester, New Jersey, it's video 7. Make sure to check your standards. We're finally doing standard 1. This is all about the Reformation.
So this video is about the English Reformation. And when we learned about the Reformation in other parts of Europe, like Zwingli and like Luther, remember those were about ideas, ideas that they disagreed with the Catholic Church. Well, the issue with England was not about Catholic teachings. There were no issues with indulgences, with sacraments, with the idea of salvation. The issue was power, who's in charge. Basically, the King of England did not like being told what he could or could not do by the Pope, and he wanted to be the head of the church in his kingdom. There's a little bit more to it than that. Now, this is not where King Henry lived, but it is an English castle. So imagine, if you will, he's walking around one day, and all of a sudden he finds a wonderful lady of the court. Her name is Anne Boleyn, and they meet, and they fall in love. They talk about poetry. They write each other poetry. This is beautiful. But wait, there's more to this story. As their love grows, in comes a woman, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon is a queen. Why? Well, because she's married to King Henry. Yes, he had a wife. So there goes the plans for Anne and King Henry. But he wonders, what if I ask the Pope to divorce Catherine? Catherine, the Pope thinks, you know what? She is from Spain, and Spain is a very Catholic country and loyal to me. And if I allow this divorce, Spain will not be so happy with me. So, what is that, you ask, Henry? Oh, the answer is no. You cannot have a divorce. Now, Anne didn't like this. I guess Catherine did. Anne tells King Henry, hey, there's this guy Martin Luther, and he's spreading ideas like against the Catholic Church, and like maybe you can like break away like he did, and like maybe you can start your own form of Christianity, and other people wrote about it too. Here, read these books. Maybe then you can like, yes, and then then you get a divorce, and then we can get married, and we'll live happily ever after. This is such a great idea. And the Pope's like, oh man, what's going on over here? And King Henry's like, yes, that is a great idea. I am going to do this. I'm going to break away from the Catholic Church and start my own religion in England, and we'll be the Christian church in England. And thank you, Anne. And then I can divorce Catherine. So that's great. This is a good way to do it. Catherine is like, holy cannoli, this is not a good plan. I don't like the sound of this whatsoever. So, they go and life continues as life does, and they have to figure out what to do. So the king has the Act of Supremacy passed by Parliament in 1534. The Act of Supremacy basically says, I am the head of the Church of England. Not the Pope, but me. And then we can get married because I'm the head of the church, and I can say I can get divorced. And I can say I can get married in the end because I'm the head, so I can do whatever the heck I want. So that's how that went. And Catherine worries. We know what's going to happen next. Well, what happens next is there's lots of land in England, monasteries, land owned by the church. In fact, 1/5 to 1/3 of the land in England was owned by the church. But now King Henry's like, well, I'm the head of the church, so guess what? I own this land. I own this monastery and that monastery. I own this monastery too. But you know what? I don't need them, so I'm just going to take them and I'm going to sell them to wealthy landowners who want this land. And now I'm making money. So once this happens, what else changes as far as the church in England or the Anglican Church? Well, really not much else. The Anglican Church basically had the same doctrines as the Catholic Church. They had no issues over salvation like Luther did. They weren't complaining about indulgences or how the Bible was interpreted. It was really just who's in charge. So if you see on the arrow here, this isn't a timeline. This is more of a spectrum. So if Catholicism was at the center, right, the original form of Christianity, how different did some other Protestant religions come? So you see the Anglican Church, or you might say Episcopalian at this, were very similar to Catholics. They weren't very different. Lutherans were a little bit more different. Calvinists were a little bit more different than them. Anabaptists at this point were the most unlike Catholics. And we'll learn more about that later. But just realize that some Protestants were more like the Catholic Church and some were more different, just depending on their various doctrines and ideologies, things like that. So when most people think of King Henry, what they really know is that he had so many wives. And that shows a little bit about the political nature of the time and some other things, I guess. So we already mentioned Catherine Aragon of Spain, whom he divorced, although Catherine never considered herself divorced. She figured biblically she was always married to him. Then Anne Boleyn, who we mentioned before, who was beheaded. Then he married Jane Seymour, who apparently was the real love of his life. She died. He then married Anne of Cleves, which was another diplomatic or a political marriage. They were divorced within 7 months. Didn't last very long. Then he married Catherine Howard, who was also beheaded. And then Catherine Parr, who outlived his Henry. Henry died in 1547 due to an injury from jousting. The injury got infected, and it ended up killing him. So who becomes king once Henry dies? Well, it became his son Edward. Edward was the son of him and Jane Seymour. He was always considered to be a sickly child, never having great health. He took the throne at a young age, so you have to really think, was it him making the decisions, or was it like the council making decisions for him? He did make some changes, though, amongst the Church of England. Things like allowing priests to marry. Services became more Protestant-like. He did things like have no more images or relics in the church. He got rid of things like stained glass to make it more like the plain and simple, like some of the Protestants had it. So now the Anglican Church moves a little bit further away than the Catholic Church, but still closer to the Catholic Church than, say, Lutheranism or things like that. So now you have to think, this is a lot of rapid change. People in England were Catholic, Catholic, Catholic. Then they're Protestant, but pretty much like Catholic, but now they're Protestant, more like Protestant. This causes a lot of turmoil in society at the time. Well, being so sick, Edward does die, and then his half-sister becomes queen, and Mary, that is. Now, Mary was the daughter of Henry and Catherine, and she, as you can imagine, was very unhappy with the way her father treated her mother, who she pretty much grew up with. Her mother was a humanist, so by the age of 9, she was reading and writing in Latin and all these sorts of things. Now, Catherine also made sure that she was raised Catholic. So you have a Catholic ruler back in the throne. And one thing that she did was she denounced the Act of Supremacy in 1553, sort of saying like, no, we're a part of the Catholic Church. I am not the head of the Church of England. And some people didn't like that. And some people wanted to be Protestant now that it's definitely introduced into England. And she wanted to win the good graces of the Pope, and she wanted England to return to Catholicism. So some people actually got persecuted for this. This was known as the Marian persecutions. So about 284 known Protestants were burnt at the stake. Have you ever heard of the term Bloody Mary? You see where its origins lie. So because of this, there were actually more Protestants at the end of her reign than the beginning, because they're like, if this is what Catholicism is, we don't want to be it. Now, of course, not all Catholics thought this was the way to do it, but this was her take at the time. As a result, England would remain a reformed nation. It was never considered a Catholic kingdom again after her. So let's think of some connections here. What caused all this change? Is when things are religious or economic or political, are they purely one, or are they a combination of that? Geography, things like that influence world events. So what changes can things like this cause? And do ideas matter? Okay, we're going to talk more about technology and how this relates to it, but how this now really changes more of the shape of the world going forward. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you like the animations today, and I'll see you next class.
People stop walking by so I can record this without looking like a weirdo. All right, good now.